care about nature, which actually was so extractive, and we pumped so much of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. Of course, the scientists in the US, in the Western world, knew 50 years ago the kind of greenhouse gases that we are pumping into the atmosphere. It's increasing the global average temperature, which is going to cause havoc. So we knew that, yet they continued with their extractive model. And US, for instance, is responsible for more than quarter of cumulative greenhouse gases so far in the atmosphere. So when we talk about temperatures changing, right, and the erratic weather that we are facing, it's all because of those past emissions which are locked into the atmospheric system and are causing these disasters. Similarly, with European Union, another quarter cumulative emissions come from Europe. So that's why we say that it's rich countries' industrial model that has caused the problem in the first place, and that's why they have more responsibility and obligation to pay.
You had some concerns about this fund being housed at the World Bank. What are your thoughts now that you're looking at what's been announced?
We are still very concerned, and we have, I would say, we took a bitter pill because we wanted this to get over the line. Rich countries kept pushing for it, saying creating a new institution is going to take a lot of time. Why don't we house it under an existing institution? And World Bank, because it manages a lot of money, would be appropriate. Our concerns were who controls the World Bank. So US has the largest share in the World Bank, and World Bank responds to its shareholders. It works for its shareholders, which means it's going to listen to its shareholder. And so far, the history of World Bank has been only exploiting developing countries, changing their economic policies which can suit the Western world so that their companies can go and create new markets. It has not helped developing countries really come out of poverty. And World Bank has also been funding fossil fuel extraction. So an institution that has caused climate crisis but also inequality around the world cannot be trusted. In the last few months, there is a lot of noise around World Bank to be changed and the way it has been operating. Such an old institution will not change overnight, and creating a new institution would have been much better. This institution that we are creating as Loss and Damage Fund has to be fit for now and fit for future, because future is uncertain. The institution has to be very agile, very flexible to respond to the newer challenges. Is World Bank ready? Can it move so fast? So what we have done, and that's why we accepted, developing countries have put certain conditions exactly on these lines to make sure that there is access for developing countries, and not just countries but also communities. At the same time, making sure that its board is not going to meddle into affairs, and World Bank has to listen to the Loss and Damage Fund board and UNFCCC processes.
Harjeet, I have a question about just how you think, just in practical terms, the way that you sort of laid out the problem, right? The most powerful countries have created this problem. Now we're asking the most powerful countries to fix it. What levers do you think you have to change and to affect change in this matter?
So one thing that we have to realize, that we are now in a multipolar world. It's not that rich countries can impose their policies unilaterally. And at the same time, the people's power that we need to recognize, how ordinary people are beginning to understand the kind of injustice. And that injustice that we are saying between countries is not limited to just countries now. Within the US is one of those countries where this highest level of inequality, the fight of 1% versus 99% is now around the world, including in the US. Look at how a tiny number of corporations are making so much of money, including the fossil fuel companies. Those 5-6 companies had a profit of $200 billion in 2022. As a global fossil fuel industry, it has multiplied its profits to $4 trillion annually, which used to be 1.5 trillion. So this is causing a lot more inequality, and that has to be exposed. And these companies are actually headquartered in the same countries who have caused the climate problem. So it all comes together. So I would say exposing this hypocrisy that on one hand rich countries say there's no money and how fossil fuel companies are making money. The fact is that industrialization has a huge cost in terms of extraction of natural resources and the pollution it has caused. But who is suffering? It's people in the developing countries who are suffering. And one, they need to develop. They still don't have resources, and now they are being battered by climate disasters. So whatever development gains that they had are now also getting eroded.
We'll be back in a moment with more of my conversation with Harjeet Singh. This is One Big Thing.
Whether you're looking forward to the holidays or you struggle with seasonal depression, this time of year can be a lot. But adding something positive to your life can help. Therapy can be a bright spot, something to make you feel grounded and give you the tools to manage. BetterHelp offers convenient, affordable therapy options so you can get started quickly. Give yourself a moment of peace. Visit betterhelp.com/Axios today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Axios.
Welcome back to One Big Thing from Axios. I'm Nyla Boodoo. Let's get back to my conversation with Harjeet Singh, the head of Global Political Strategy for Climate Action Network International. I spoke to him in Dubai, where I'm covering COP28, the climate conference, and where one major controversy has been that this year's COP president is Sultan Ahmad Al Jaber, the UAE climate envoy and CEO of the state-owned Abu Dhabi National Oil Company. Dr. Al Jaber made waves when he said there was, quote, no science behind the push to phase out fossil fuels, which was widely criticized. And after an uproar, he then later said he did respect the science. I asked Harjeet about this year's COP president.
Having a COP president who continues to remain in the post of CEO of an oil company is just not acceptable, and that's why we challenge that, because we know that it's fossil fuels that have caused the problem in the first place. The important thing to note here that Paris Agreement and the convention both do not talk about fossil fuels. There's no mention of coal, oil or gas. So clearly there's a handprint of the fossil fuel industry that has ensured that the conversation remains on reducing emissions. So what happens? The responsibility goes to the citizens, that how green we need to be when these companies on the supply side of the problem, which means fossil fuels, continue to extract and intensify the problem, whereas the onus is shifted to ordinary people. So that's why we need to really call them out, in this process. I still believe that this space can deliver a lot if the spirit of the conversation is changed. If we have real leaders who step up and lead by example, and they have the obligation to lead, but they are not leading.
Do you feel like the spirit of the conversation has changed?
I would say it's beginning to change. Again, that links to the multipolar world that we are living in right now. Look at the whole topic of loss and damage. It's something that is so dear to vulnerable countries. They are the ones who are losing the most and have least resources. They led that fight along with civil society, and we got it. If you remember Secretary Kerry last year, September, saying that it's not possible to have an agreement on loss and damage. We got it at Sharm el-Sheikh a couple of months later. So I think it's the power of vulnerable countries, civil society, supported by media, has really helped us echo that a shift is required. And that's why here at COP28, on the very first day when we got the decision on loss and damage, it was actually to respond to some of those concerns that this process has not been delivering. So it was strategic to have that decision. Otherwise, there's a very painfully interesting phrase which says nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. And the kind of bargaining that happens, I've been following negotiations for 15 years, I can tell you, it's excruciating. Things that should stand on its own are traded.
Like what?
If you want money for loss and damage, then you have to make sure that you get more ambition from developing countries without any offer of financial support for mitigation. You may not believe that the way Paris Agreement looks right now was nowhere near what rich countries wanted. They only wanted mitigation to be in Paris Agreement. Why rich countries only want mitigation? Because they know that if developing countries don't reduce emissions, they are also going to suffer. They were never bothered about the issues of adaptation and loss and damage. The reason you see that in Paris Agreement shows that the balance is shifting, and developing countries, particularly the vulnerable ones, are able to resist that pressure and say what they value and what means to them a lot. So you can see that shift happening.
Well, let's talk about civil society for just a moment. When we think about individuals in civil society, if you were to do a call to action, what would it be for an individual of any global citizen?
All of us as individuals have to play our part. We have to make sure that we are very conscious about the food we eat, because carbon footprint is linked to that. The way we travel has an impact on the environment, the way we use electricity or other forms of energy. But at the same time, I must say, not to undermine or underestimate what individuals can do, but what is most important is to influence and put pressure on politicians. I come from India. I want to use a bicycle. I can tell you infrastructure is not ready. Even if I want to do, the public transport system is good, but still the last mile connectivity is not there. So individuals can only go to a point, but beyond that, you need support from the government in terms of infrastructure. So I would say, do what you can do to reduce your carbon footprint and be very conscious about your actions. At the same time, put pressure on your policymaker, on your politician, from your area, from your district, from your state. That's what is going to bring about the change, because they are the ones who are holding powers. They are the ones who are actually protecting the interest of fossil fuel industry and many other polluters.
When you think about this past year, I'm sure there's a lot of things that keep you up at night that have you worried, but are there any things in particular of threads you see, of concerns you have that are the most pressing right now?
I think for me, what is mind-boggling, that it's not dearth of science. Science is very clear where we are, 1.2 degree. In fact, temporarily we have crossed 2 degree threshold, and disasters are happening, not limited to developing countries. I know a couple of years ago, when it was only developing countries who were hit by those storms and floods. Now developed countries, rich countries are also getting affected. Yet, political leaders are siding with the fossil fuel industry, which is the cause of the problem. That pains me, and that makes me so angry.
Do you ever despair that things won't change in time?
It has taken a long time, and it will take a long time. But I also see that power of people is increasing. And loss and damage fund is one such decision that gives us hope. It's not enough, but it gives us hope that if you are working together and you are united and you are working for the right cause, and if people are with you, and of course I would also say media, which has supported massively on this cause, we will be able to really change things, and now much faster. It will not take as long as 30 years because we don't even have that much time, but we'll be able to do a lot more. I think it's people power that's most important.
Thank you for taking the time to speak with me. I appreciate it.
Thank you, my pleasure.
You can find more of our coverage of COP28 at Axios.com and more about Harjeet's work in our show notes. We reached out to the World Bank for comment on this episode and have not heard back, but we will drop their response into our show notes if we do receive one. One last thing before we go today. I've been here at COP28 with Axios' Andrew Friedman, who's been covering climate in these UN negotiations for decades. And I asked Andrew for his take on what role climate activists play in these talks.
So climate activists really play kind of a conscience role. They're the conscience of the UNFCCC process in a way. They team up with different country coalitions to push certain positions so that negotiators take them into the negotiating rooms and really stick to those actual positions when the going gets tough. They often get quite a bit of media attention for doing actions in the site of where the negotiations are, doing different protests. And really, they are what brings this issue down to earth, because a lot of the negotiators can get caught up in technical language, they can get caught up in the battles of the day, and the activists are really the voices for the people on the ground who are suffering increasingly from climate change.
And that's Axios' Andrew Friedman. And that's all for this week's edition of One Big Thing. You can always send feedback by texting me at 202-918-4893 or emailing podcasts@axios.com. The One Big Thing team includes supervising producer Alexandra Botti and sound engineer Jake Howitt. Alex Sugiyara composed our theme music. Asia Whitaker-Moore is Axios' executive editor, and Sarah Kailani-Gu is Axios' editor-in-chief. Special thanks to Fonda Mwangi, Lauren Whitney Gottbreath, and the rest of the Axios events team for help with this week's episode. I'm Nyla Boodoo. Thanks for listening, stay safe, and we'll be back with you here next Thursday.
Whether you're looking forward to the holidays or you struggle with seasonal depression, this time of year can be a lot. But adding something positive to your life can help. Therapy can be a bright spot, something to make you feel grounded and give you the tools to manage. BetterHelp offers convenient, affordable therapy options so you can get started quickly. Give yourself a moment of peace. Visit betterhelp.com/Axios today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Axios.
LinkedIn presents.
I'm Rufus Griscom, and this is The Next Big Idea. Today, how the female body drove 200 million years of human evolution. I think it's fair to say that as a species, we are narcissists. We're impressed by ourselves. We relish the story of human evolution, much as a sentimental person loves to share pictures from their childhood. Wasn't I cute? Look at this one. This might help explain why Yuval Noah Harari's book, Sapiens, which tells the scientific story of our origin with the simplicity of, say, the Bible, is among the best-selling books in history. We had the pleasure of having Yuval as a guest on the show, and I asked him about this nostalgia we have for our collective childhood. I asked if he felt it too, if part of him longed for the ancient world. He told me,
I think in a way almost all of us have this longing. Something inside us remembers the Stone Age and sometimes wants to go back there.
I feel this, a desire to know what it felt like to live immersed in the environment in which all of our instincts and senses evolved. And so I've explored our ancient past on this show with
The wide turn. God. Itty bitty car, but the widest turn ever.
would invade Lebanon as it's done in the past. Ben Sushan, the Israeli soldier, says Hezbollah's fighters are over there, well armed and organized.
Sometimes it's also scary. One time I was in the shower and the shooting started, and it was really scary. I ran to my room and, take my clothes and weapon and went outside. So it's really can attack you anytime.
Many Israelis who consider the Upper Galilee their home tell NPR the Israeli army's presence is comforting but not enough. They say the border is too big, too porous to defend reliably. After leaving the frontier, I stop in the city of Nazareth, a 90-minute drive away, where people evacuated from northern communities are being housed by the government in hotels.
We're here already five weeks. A little bit more than 300 people.
Erez Bergman is from the Snir kibbutz. His entire community is here, men, women, and a lot of kids, including his own. He says after seeing what happened during Hamas's attack, he's thinking about leaving the north for good, to protect his family.
Yes, I'm saying it sadly, but yes, I do not want to make my children in a position that they are harmed.
Bergman, too, says there's only one thing that will make him feel safe returning home. He wants a full-scale war that will do to Hezbollah what Israel is now trying to do to Hamas.
I mean, we will fight very hard for Hezbollah. That's the only option. It's not a good option, but if we want to go home and feel that there's nobody near the border that can threaten us or our children, that's the only solution I can see.
Many of the Israelis interviewed by NPR voiced impatience with their government for not already striking harder against Hezbollah. Others predicted that as soon as the fight with Hamas is over in the south, Israel's military will turn its attention here. Ryan Mann, NPR News, on the Israel-Lebanon border.
All Things Considered from NPR News.
Coming up on WVXU, the Biden administration is pressuring Israel to spare civilians in Gaza, but many Israelis have hardened their stance. Israel pushes back on its staunchest ally, coming up at 5:40 this afternoon during All Things Considered. 91.7 WVXU, 88.5 WMUB.
WVXU goes wherever you do. Listen to 91.7 online at iHeartRadio.com and on your mobile device through the iHeartRadio app. Support comes from Nederlander Entertainment, presenting Andrea Bocelli Sunday, April 7th at Heritage Bank Center. One of the most recognized voices in the entertainment industry, Bocelli will perform songs from his beloved repertoire and will feature selections from his solo album, Believe. Andrea Bocelli, April 7th at Heritage Bank Center. Tickets are available at Ticketmaster.com. Support comes from Roads, Rivers, and Trails. RRT can help cover you for the holidays with its curated selection of outdoor equipment and clothing. You can find high-performance outerwear, sustainable clothing, and unique gifts to satisfy everyone in the family. Visit RRT in downtown Milford or shop online at roadsriversandtrails.com. Support comes from the Wine Merchant, celebrating 50 years of serving the greater Cincinnati area. The Wine Merchant offers 3 different wine club options to choose from. Gourmet gift baskets and gift cards are also available online at winemerchantcincinnati.com. The Wine Merchant can help you discover the right wine for your taste or the wine lover on your list.
This traffic report is supported by AAA Bob Summerall Tire and Services. Claywade Bailey Bridge still closed between Covington and Cincinnati for a crash investigation. Eastbound 275 at Reed Hartman, a wreck on the left shoulder. Northbound 75 before Union Center Boulevard, a wreck on the left shoulder. And on the ramp from southbound 75 to eastbound 275, there's a wreck. From 9, first warning weather, 40 for tonight's low, partly cloudy, windy, and 58 tomorrow. It's 54 degrees now.
Support for NPR comes from this station. And from BritBox with Payback, a new original crime thriller from the creator of Line of Duty and Bodyguard, starring Grantchester's Morgan Christie and Ozark's Peter Mullen. Streaming at BritBox.com/NPR. And from Procter & Gamble, maker of Metamucil, a fiber supplement containing psyllium, a plant-based fiber for trapping and removing waste in the digestive system, designed to be taken every day. More at metamucil.com. This is NPR.
From NPR News, this is All Things Considered. I'm Ari Shapiro.
And I'm Elsa Chang. Over the past couple years, the Biden administration has been fostering a closer relationship with the Indian government. For example, this past summer, President Biden gave Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi one of the highest honors for a world leader, an official state visit. But while the White House has been cozying up to the Modi government, members of Biden's own party have raised concerns about human rights and religious freedoms in India. And just last week, the U.S. Justice Department announced charges against an Indian national for allegedly plotting to kill a Sikh activist in New York. Prosecutors say an Indian government official was behind the assassination attempt. We wanted to know where relations between the two countries stand and why the Biden administration is so invested in India to begin with. So, we're turning to Arzan Tarapour. He's a research scholar at Stanford University focusing on South Asian security issues. Welcome.
Thanks very much, Elsa. Great to be with you.
So, before we get to this indictment of the Indian national I just mentioned, I actually want to start with China. Because China is currently the top national security threat for the U.S., right? How much is the Biden administration nurturing a closer relationship with India because they believe India would step up as an ally should there be a confrontation with China?
So there's clearly a heavy focus on China, and it's not just the Biden administration, it's several successive administrations that have recognized that India is an important country globally, and especially in the Indo-Pacific. A large part of that is because of China itself. Parts of Washington are concerned at the prospect of a military confrontation, and they hope that India will play some sort of role in that. There are big question marks over that. But aside from the military confrontation, as the US engages in strategic competition with China over the rules of the road and the shape of the international system, they recognize that India will be an important partner in helping to shape that system.
Okay, well, I'm going to pick up on the military element because some have argued that India just isn't worth the kind of investment the Biden administration is making in the relationship with India because India would not come to the U.S.'s side in a military confrontation with China. I mean, do you still see value in India and the U.S. working together to incrementally deter China?
Absolutely. So, first of all, we have to be careful when we talk about military confrontation. It's a very big, amorphous subject, right? Most of the time when we're talking about military confrontation between the US and China, it usually is the Taiwan scenario. And in that, I think on balance, it is unlikely that India will fight for Taiwan directly in and around Taiwan. But, as you said, I think there's still a lot that India can do as a strategic actor in the region. India has, for decades, had its own strategic competition with China. They are abiding and intensifying security rivals themselves, and it's in the US's interests to ensure that India has the wherewithal and capacity to deter Chinese assertiveness and aggression, and, should it come to it, to acquit itself well in a conflict against China. So it's not just about Taiwan, it's about India as a stabilizing strategic actor in the region.
You mentioned near the beginning of this conversation non-military benefits to both countries for forging a stronger relationship. But let me ask you this. Are some of these benefits coming at the expense of the democratic values that President Biden has openly advocated? You know, like if the U.S. is supporting a country such as India that has had a questionable human rights record?
In the US, there has been a tension between how the US sees India as a strategic actor in the region and in the world, and what it thinks of India's political character at home domestically. The Biden administration seeks to address that by assuring its critics that it does in fact deliver the messages behind closed doors to India about its concerns over India's political direction. There is definitely a tension, especially from the Biden administration, that does focus on democracy. But it's a tension that I think they've sort of decided that they can handle. It's two separate parts of the brain. One part of the brain cares about democracy and speaks to the Indians behind closed doors about it. The other part of the brain cares about India's external behavior and seeks to forge ahead with an ever-tightening partnership to stabilize the Indo-Pacific.
Finally, I want to get into the indictment of Nikhil Gupta. He's the Indian national who's being prosecuted for allegedly plotting to kill a Sikh activist on U.S. soil. And these allegations, I mean, they came just months after Canada accused agents of the Indian government of murdering a Sikh community leader there.